Welcome to the Communication Compass, unlocking the secrets to more effective communications. So, I'm going to start with a couple of little activities. Pop your answers in chat, please. When you have a big decision to make, do you prefer to have time to think and organise your thoughts? Do you like to generate ideas and perhaps talk through those ideas to help you make a decision? Do you prefer to discuss with your colleagues and get their opinions and try and get some form of consensus? Or do you just want to know what it's all about, know the facts, fast, make a fast decision? So if you could just pop in chat A, B, C or D as to your preference, that would be brilliant. These B's, get the range of put an A there, a couple of A's, perfect. 3 A's actually. B's and C's and C's and D's. Excellent. So even just on this call, we can see that there are some real kind of strong differences in the way we approach making a decision. So how about this one? Imagine you send a detailed email to a key stakeholder asking for feedback on a major project that you are working on, and you are putting your heart and soul into this project, and you get a 2-word reply: looks good. Now, what's your immediate reaction? Just pop a couple of words into the chat, your absolute knee-jerk immediate reaction. Yeah, so there we're seeing, great, let's get cracking, abrupt, let's move on. Great, thanks. Is that it? Deflated. Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're seeing those differences. And this actually, a few months ago, I had this in a real life example of this. A colleague sent me an email and in response to something that I'd sent him. And it just said, just do it. That was it. No, hi, Michelle, or anything else. Just do it. And fine. So yeah, great. I can crack on with it then, was my kind of knee-jerk response. But a colleague happened to see this email, the response, and she said, how rude is that? Who does he think he is, sending emails out like that? And do you know what? I just didn't see that at all until she pointed that kind of reaction out. So yeah, what I'm talking about are these differences, the drivers behind the responses, and how we can use these insights to be a more effective communicator is really what we're going to be focusing on today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Michelle MacArthur Morgan, and I'm the founding partner and creator of the Jigsaw Discovery Tool. Started my career, feels like hundreds of years ago now, working in the hospitality sector, originally as a part-time waitress, like many people do, but went on through university and various operational positions before ending up with a degree in hospitality management and moving into leadership positions. And then about 24, 25 years ago, I moved across full time, shall I say, into the world of learning and development. And my work over those last 24, 25 years has taken me far and wide, working with organisations not only in the UK, but also in the UAE, Europe, America, in both public and corporate worlds. And academically, besides my degree in hospitality, I've also got a degree in psychology, and for the last 16 years or so, very much been involved with neuroscience, following and studying the latest research and looking at what we can learn and how we can apply that to the real world. And I'm actually part of it's an international group actually, and we meet once a month online and we look at the latest research findings that's come out in the last few weeks. And then we say, okay, what does this mean to us in the real world, the world of work, the way that we work, the way that we lead, the way that we manage? And so I very much kind of within our webinars and in our trainings, it's very much about integrating that latest thinking from the latest research, what science is telling us around how our brains function or not, as the case may be. So our key takeaways today from the webinar. Hopefully you're going to gain some valuable self-awareness and identify your natural communication styles. You're going to be able to quickly recognise communication styles of others based on a few simple cues. Get actionable strategies to adjust your approach and connect more effectively with just about anybody. And understand how communication styles can clash and learn how to prevent and resolve these misunderstandings. As usual, the webinar will be divided into chapters. I think today we've got 4 chapters. In chapter 1, we're going to be looking at why smart people miscommunicate and the context of communication in the uncertain, brittle world that we kind of are living in. In chapter 2, we're focusing on some of the underpinning science shaping how we communicate. 3, we're diving into those 4 communication styles, give you an opportunity to identify your own personal style and recognising the style of others. And in chapter 4, we're looking at some of those practical strategies for flexing and adapting communication styles for far more effective communication. So, moving on. Have you ever spent time meticulously crafting an email or perhaps a presentation only for the recipient to completely miss your main point? Or perhaps you've been in a conversation with a colleague where you felt you were speaking really clearly, putting your points across, and yet they reacted like you were speaking a different language. If so, you have been stuck in what we would call the communication maze. The biggest cause of friction, stress, and inefficiency in our personal and professional lives isn't usually incompetence or ill will. It's more often than not a failure to align with the other person's behavioural or communication preferences. We often communicate in a way that we naturally prefer to send and receive information, and we unconsciously expect everyone else to operate the same way. And when they don't respond with that pace and detail or enthusiasm that we use, we might mistakenly conclude that they're perhaps being difficult or they're just not interested. But here's the truth. The reality is that every single person has a uniquely, deeply ingrained way of thinking, acting, and communicating. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. That's the course concept we're going to explore. But what happens when things go wrong? Poor communication is often the primary culprit when a conversation derails or a project fails. Though quantifying the exact percentage that communication is responsible for can be difficult and can be very context dependent. Estimates in business and project management frequently place the impact of communication failures at 50% or more of all project setbacks and relational breakdowns. So, misunderstandings regarding lack of clarity regarding the expectations or roles, not fully understanding roles, unaddressed conflicts, inadequate information. These all contribute significantly to a negative outcome. And yes, there are other factors like technical errors, lack of resources, unforeseen external circumstances. They certainly can play a role in project breakdowns and miscommunications. But if effective communication is in place, it can often mitigate some of the risks and ensure that any risks are actually identified early and they're managed properly. So ultimately, a large majority of relationship breakdowns, miscommunications, projects failing can be traceable back to ineffective communication. Putting it simply, the real problem is that vast, frustrating gap between the message we send, the intention, and the result that we get, the impact. So let's now turn to look at some of the neuroscience of communication and answer that critical question. How do we close that frustrating gap between the message we intend to send and the impact it actually has? And the answer isn't found just in behavioural preferences. It's in the structure of the brain. So we're going to look at some of that neuroscience of communication. What does the science tell us? And this isn't just academic theory. It's the biological root of why one person hears your directness as efficiency, while another hears it actually as a threat. And we're going to explore the automatic mental shortcuts our brains use and critically how to trigger what we would call a connection response that aligns with the listener's preferences, giving you that tangible strategic advantage in your conversations. So to bridge the intent impact gap, we have to look inside the head of the listener. And that starts with the two core thinking systems of the brain, a concept that was popularised by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. System 1, System 2 thinking, or fast and slow thinking systems. So System 1 is the fast brain. It's automatic, intuitive, emotional, always on. It jumps to instant conclusions, makes those split-second judgments, and its primary concern is safety. It's why you might recoil from somebody if they speak with a sharp tone, or instantly trust someone who uses familiar language. And it's where our gut reactions live. And critically, it's the main filter through which communication is initially processed. System 2 thinking is the slow thinking, the slow brain. And this is logical, deliberate, effortful, analytical part. It's what we use for complex problem solving, evaluating evidence, understanding multi-stepped arguments. It requires significant mental effort, and therefore the brain, in its drive for energy conservation, tries to keep System 2 thinking off as much as possible. As we've discussed in many times in various webinars, the brain's primary role is to keep us safe. It's about survival. And it does this by constantly being alert, scanning our environment for any potential threats, by conserving energy and predicting outcomes. So a person's behavioural preference is essentially a preset, a System 1 communication filter. So when you communicate in a way that clashes with the other person's preference, so for example, if you give a brief, rushed summary to someone who has a preference for a longer, detailed explanation, or if you give a long, wordy, meandering explanation to a person who prefers a short, direct communication, their System 1 thinking detects chaos and it triggers a threat response, immediately bypassing logic. The person potentially will shut down or get defensive, and their System 2 thinking never gets the chance to process your actual intended message. So to be an effective communicator, we need to craft our message so that it doesn't trigger a threat response from the recipient's System 1 filter, their preference. We need to craft our message in a way that it enables the message to be processed by the recipient's System 2 thinking. So following on from the fast, slow brain idea, let's talk about the specific alarm system that dictates whether your message is processed logically or instantly rejected. And this is the brain's emotional network, which is located within the brain's limbic circuit and includes the amygdala. So if you think of the limbic circuit as the brain's ultimate security guard, its one and only job is survival. It doesn't care if your quarterly report is flawless or not, but it does care if the way you present that report is safe, will keep you safe. When you communicate, the limbic system has two essential choices for response. A threat response. And this is triggered by communication that feels unsafe, unpredictable, or disrespectful to the individual's core needs. For example, a lack of supporting data for a person who requires detailed facts, or an aggressive, overly blunt tone for a person who values relationships and harmony. The threat response is instantaneous. We go into fight, flight, or freeze. And when that happens, if the limbic system perceives a threat, then all logic and reasoning shuts down. Alternatively, we can trigger a connection or reward response. And this is triggered when the communication is predictable, respectful, and aligns with the person's deeply held motivations and preferences. So when you speak to a person who values speed and efficiency in a concise and focused way, or you engage a sociable, creative type person with genuine enthusiasm, the limbic circuit perceives this communication as safe. And this is when their executive function, their system two thinking opens up, and they can finally process your message using logic and rational thinking. So our biggest takeaway here is you cannot reason with a brain that feels threatened. So your role to be an effective as an effective communicator is to use a behavioural framework as a map to help you bypass that threat response and consistently evoke the connection. The paradigm trap. How mental models shape communication. A paradigm is simply the lens, the frame, or the mental map through which you view the world. But it's a powerful shortcut, and our brain develops this paradigm to help us interpret information efficiently. Paradigms help us because they allow us to instantly interpret familiar signals. If you're talking to someone who shares your communication style, your paradigms align and the conversation flows smoothly and it hits that connection response. However, the moment you face a different behavioural preference, your established paradigm becomes a blind spot, a trap. So if you assume your logical, results-driven or relationship-focused way of communicating is the only valid way, when the recipient doesn't respond to your map, you become frustrated. So you tend to repeat yourself and you ultimately trigger their threat response. So here, the key insight is your behavioural preference is your communication paradigm. And effective communication isn't about teaching someone else to adopt, should I say, your paradigm. It's about recognizing that they are operating with a different but equally valid map. And then for you to possess the skill to temporarily adapt your communication to align with their preference. So let's do a practical demonstration of the FAST filter in action. And we've just defined fast and slow thinking and the paradigm trap. For this activity, I'd like you to use the chat function. And I'm going to present you with a quick, ambiguous scenario. What I'd like you to do is type your very first gut reaction, the answer that pops into your head instantly. But please don't overthink it. So here we go. Your colleague, who is consistently 10 minutes late to all your meetings, just sent you a single text message that says, "Can't make the meeting, 2 p.m. today, need to reschedule, urgent." So, what is your knee-jerk reaction? What was your immediate thought? Pop your answers in chat for me. Disrespect, annoyed, needs addressing, no problem, happy to sit with it. Something must have happened, what's the problem? Yeah. Shift it, say shift it. Is everything okay? Do they need help? Wonderful. Thank you. And again, we can notice there how widely your answers varied. You were all processing the exact same three pieces of data. A late colleague, can't make it, and urgent. And the varied answers are all a result of your fast filter, your ingrained communication paradigm kicking in. And this exercise shows us that our preferred style is often our communication default. The paradigm trap makes us jump to conclusions that fit our worldwide view. So to truly decode, if you like, interpret communication, we must engage our slow thinking, system two thinking. And we do that by pausing and then intentionally consider a different preference. Maybe they're busy with an urgent maybe it's something that's a task focused priority and it's got absolutely nothing to do with them being disorganized. That pause is the moment where effective communication begins. So let's move on to chapter 3 then. So that exercise showed us in a flash how quickly our brain, our system one, defaults to its ingrained perspective or its paradigm. And if we want to move past those traps and be a more effective communicator, we need to understand the source of those defaults. And that source is your behavioural preference. So the human brain prefers simplicity as opposed to complexity. And science has shown us that if we want learning to stick, it needs to be broken down into simple concepts and ideas that are easy to recall, that don't require great usage of the brain's energy to really drain on the brain's energy reserves. And the Jigsaw Discovery Behavioural Framework simplifies the world of human behaviour into 4 foundational communication styles. Now, these are not rigid boxes or tests that you take to pass or fail. Just think of them as 4 distinct drivers that describe how you prefer to focus your energy and attention and how you prefer to talk and listen. And each style has a unique approach to pace, so how fast they speak and move, and priority, what they actually focus on. So, action-orientated preferences. Known for their focus, drive, ability to deliver the result, direct, straight talking, challenging, competitiveness and determination. And they focus on results and action. They tend to speak in quite a fast pace, a strong speaking voice very often. And they use words like outcomes, purpose, goals, speed. Our creative orientated people, imaginative, visionary, abstract thinkers, energetic, likes novelty, they're quite curious, they love enjoying things, socially adept, impulsive, able to think on the spot. And their focus is around ideas and recognition. Again, they speak in quite a fast pace, but it's quite excitable, is their speaking voice. They use words like opportunity, vision, concepts, freedom. Are caring orientated, people orientated. They value people, they value relationships, they're tolerant, they tend to be quite laid back individuals, striving for harmony, respectful, helpful, supportive individuals. Their primary focus, relationships and harmony. Now, they tend to speak at a slightly slower, and it's something that we don't naturally just kind of hear until we think about it and we actually start to listen to the pace that people speak at. It's like they have a slightly slower, more wordy kind of pace. And they use words such as support, values, involve, appreciation. And lastly, are organised orientated people. They like detailed information, disciplined, process driven, maintains order, risk averse. They're practical, attention to detail type people, follow the rules and policies and procedures. Their focus on accuracy, logic, correctness. The pace, again, speak slightly slower to the point that you can actually almost hear the punctuation marks in their speech. They use words like evidence, rigorous, experience, precise. So each one of these styles is valuable and necessary for effective communication. But the starting point is to identify your own starting point, your own communication style. So to do that, I'm going to ask you to think about these two questions. First of all, think about what is your pace? When speaking, what is your pace? Do you tend to speak quickly? Do you perhaps interrupt people often? Unintentionally, but it's just your natural kind of style. Do you focus on the big picture? Do you prioritize getting things done now? So what's your pace? Fast or slow? Then what's your priority? Do you tend to focus more on tasks and logic, or do you focus more on people and emotions? So just take a moment to think about those four styles and which one of those four styles are you fast speaking, focusing on task, which could be action? Are you slower speaking, but focus on logic and task, which could be organised? Fast speaking, focusing on those emotions of excitement and enthusiasm, could be our creative, or a slower speaking, focusing again very much on people and emotions, could be the caring. There's no right or wrong answers here. And if you want to pop your thoughts about that into chat, please do so. Somebody's just put, my style depends on the situation and the people that are involved. Yeah, absolutely. And that's because you're naturally doing these things. Some people, and I have got to say, it's a very small percentage of the total population who do this naturally. It is something we can all learn to do. And hopefully, certainly people who work within the world of learning and development, we tend to do this more because we've learnt to do it, or it's something we naturally do because we're people orientated people. So yeah, I can totally understand why you would say that your style, but you will have one, two behavioural preferences, your default. Yeah, Richard, you naturally switch between all four colours. Again, yeah. Fast and enthusiastic is my default. Brilliant. Lovely. Well, thank you. So let's just look at these in a little bit more kind of detail now. And especially the one column here I'll focus on mainly is what happens under pressure. So an action orientated person. So we said they speak fast, strong speaking voice. It's results and action that they focus on. Under pressure, their behaviour can come across as a bit pushy, dominating. They tend to become more impatient and can often be perceived as being aggressive. They don't themselves see themselves as being aggressive, but under pressure, they can be perceived by others as being overbearing and aggressive. So our creative again speaks fast, excitable, um, kind of pace, and they focus very much on ideas and recognition. And here again, under pressure, we'll see that they become a little bit disorganized. People often perceive them as being a bit scatty, a bit scatterbrained, very impulsive, really just ignore any kind of structure, rules, policies, and procedures. They can often be seen to be erratic and they make promises and then forget about them. They don't follow through on things. They perhaps spend time socializing, whereas other people perceive that we're under pressure, we've got a lot to do. We should be working, not socializing. And they overstate facts, and they overplay their emotions sometimes as well, around kind of they're trying to seek your other people's attention, basically. With our caring, speak slower, more wordy, focusing very much on relationships and harmony. Under pressure, they actually will avoid conflict at basically all costs, and they'd rather agree with you externally, even though internally they totally disagree with you. They rely heavily on the kind of approval. They look to others for reassurance and the approval of other people. And they really do back away from making a solo decision. So they can be seen as being indecisive in those situations. They can be vague about their true feelings. They bottle up frustration. And one of the things I often say when I'm speaking about the caring orientated person is that on the surface, they glide along like a swan. They seem to take everything in stride, into their stride. But this continues until at some point they're like a volcano that erupts. They explode. And again, that's when they're under pressure. And the organised, again, speaks slow, structured, focuses on accuracy and logic under pressure. Withdraw, become overly critical, nitpicking. Some people say they become quite cold. They get really bogged down in the detail. They've become really that perfectionist, constantly striving that hunt, they want all the information. They keep asking for more. No matter how much information you give them, they still want more. And they become really quite inflexible, and become very resistant to any kind of new ideas, any innovation, or any ideas that they feel are being emotionally driven. So now that you've seen the full breakdown, first of all, does your initial assessment still hold true? And then once you've thought about that kind of dominant preference, then what would be your secondary or backup preference? Now, I appreciate, again, speaking to colleagues within learning and development, we're probably, ahead of the game in all this. You probably know your dominant style, your secondary preference, but just spend that moment, remembering we are a blend of all four. But your primary style is the one that you're most comfortable, the one that you would automatically, certainly under pressure, go back to. Yeah. And Julie's just asked a question, how situational is this? Um, Behaviour is very situational. It's all about our observable behaviours. It is very situational. Sarah, yeah, it's quite possible to be an introverted yellow. Um, Speaking as very much as a generalism, this is, but as a generalism, you would tend to find that there is a higher percentage of dominant red and yellows, using the colours there, who are more extrovert, and a higher percentage of greens and blues tend to be more introvert. Having said that, you know, you said yourself, you feel that you're an introverted yellow. Um, Myself, I'm an introverted red. So, you know, it is by no means given that all introverts are green and blue, or all extroverts are red and yellow. You can quite, you know, you can be introverted, red, or yellow for that matter. Sheena, that's fine. Yellow, green, but red under pressure. Yeah. Um, the yellow, green, but red under pressure is quite interesting. When I talk about stress and we look at stress, the first thing we do when we start to go under pressure, kind of what I would call mild kind of pressure as opposed to stress, is under pressure, we tend to exaggerate our existing behavioural preference. So as a red, I can be kind of uh, not quite as patient perhaps as some other, perhaps the green, caring. Um, when I become under a little bit of pressure, I become more impatient. However, when we are stressed, then what we tend to do there is we flip and we take on the traits of the opposing colour on the behavioural map. So red flips into green and can often become quite emotional. Not necessarily do they show that to the outside world, but certainly with to themselves. So they can become quite emotional. For example, so we flip and we take on the more negative sides, the unhelpful, that's a better word, the unhelpful traits of the opposite, diagonally opposite preference on the behavioural map. But if you want to find out more about that, you can either have a chat to me later, drop me an email, I'm happy to talk about that. Or if you go onto the Jigsaw Discovery Tool YouTube channel, then you will find some webinars, previous webinars and short videos and things around the stress and how we flip into our diagonally opposite preference on the behavioural map. So thank you for all that. So moving into our last chapter 4 then. So we've established that your communication style is your default setting. So now for the kind of most powerful skill really in communication is identifying the preferences of others. Because if you know your colleagues needs detail, then you can give them that detail. If you know your colleague needs speed, then you can give them speed. And it's not about manipulation. It's effective communication. You're meeting other people where they are at. Now, you don't need to do any kind of formal assessment to identify someone's style. You just need to be a skilled observer. And behavioural preferences are constantly revealed through two main channels, verbal cues and visual cues. So verbal cues, listen to their language. I've already said some suggested words that you will often hear the different preferences using. Listen to how they structure their statements. What do they pay attention to? What do they actually talk about? Because this reveals their core priority. So here's some examples. Action orientated tend to use assertive language. Let's decide now. Their priority, they ask questions, you know, what are the results? Organised, use more precise language according to the data. And their priority, is it accurate? Is it logical? Does it make sense? The caring orientated, use that collaborative language. Let's find common ground. You know, the priority, How does this impact on the people? And the creative. They use that enthusiastic language. Imagine the possibilities. It's all about the vision, the future. So those are just some of the kind of um, verbal clues, cues you can actually look for. So our visual cues then. Pay attention to the pace and the environment they create around themselves. Okay, the pace of speech. But not only the pace of speech, because you could say that's more into the verbal, but also the pace at which they move. Do they move rapidly? Do they speak rapidly? Do they cut to the chase? Or are they speaking more slowly and deliberately? Is their workspace highly organised and functional? Or is it cluttered up? Has it got lots of photographs or awards or motivational posters on the wall? Observe their body language in meetings, for example. So, do they maintain intense, direct eye contact? Do they show impatience? Or do they smile and nod frequently? Do they seek agreement? And the key thing here is look for the clues, not the label. So a key takeaway is observe the behaviour over trying to guess their personality. Don't try to slap a label on them instantly. Instead, ask yourself, are they speaking fast or slow? Are they talking about facts, results, people, or vision? And once you have these two data points, you've then pinpointed their likely style and you're ready to flex your communication approach. So let's put that learning into practice. Which communication preference is most likely sending this message? So we've got the four communication styles, whether you call them red, yellow, green, and blue, or whether you want to call them the action, organised, creative, and caring is entirely up to you. But pop your answers. So we've got some reds in there. Yep, we're all coming up with the red. Absolutely. And what are some of the tells, the cues or clues in there, do you think? Why have you skimmed? Yeah, direct. Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about speed, efficiency, bottom line, isn't it? You can just sense that and pick up from that. Absolutely. So let's have another go. Which communication preference do you think this is most likely? Who's giving the feedback? Yep, the yellow, absolutely. And what gives that one away? What the clues or the cues? Tells? Exclamation marks. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic idea. Imagine the media cover. You can feel that excitement. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Grand ideas, little detail. Absolutely. Thank you. So, flexing your style then just means intentionally adjusting your communication output to match the other person's input preference. And this is the moment that you can then engage your slow thinking system too. Pause and choose an appropriate delivery method that's going to increase the likelihood of your message being heard and accepted. So in the next few slides, there's some do's and don'ts, specific actionable adjustments that you can make to connect with the four styles. Now, in addition to these, remember the language And the pace is also important. And I gave you a few suggested words, and within our communication courses, we go obviously much deeper into some of those words and things. But just to give you the kind of the flavour for it then. So with our reds, the do's, be prepared, be on time, be clear, direct and to the point. I always say to people, if you're communicating with somebody who is red, the action orientated, then speak and think in bullet points. Ask specific questions, short, sharp, to the point, focused questions. Stick to the business. Provide options. Go in with solutions. Don't just, I've got a problem. And the don'ts. They don't want lots of detail. They don't do emotion and personal stuff. That's a great suit that you're wearing today. We're wasting time in the action orientated mind. Don't ramble, don't be disorganized. So move on to our creative. Have an agenda in your own mind, because they don't want an agenda. They don't like being restricted by a framework, by feeling hemmed in by an agenda. But have the agenda already in your own mind. Build in time to go off topic, because they like to wander off, because they're very creative individuals, creative thinking. You would say something and that could switch on an idea, a light bulb, and they're going to go off on tangent on that. You're going to have to keep drawing the conversation back to the topic. Give them options, not opinions. You're just adding to their ideas that they can then pick up and build on. Try and finish your conversations by agreeing some next steps. Don't do too much talking. Don't be pushy. Don't be too direct. Don't give them too much detail. So it's all about that freedom, that flexibility, their creativeness, talking up opportunities, possibilities. Remember those words. Choose your words. The green caring. Begin in a friendly kind of manner. I always say, because my own personal preference is very red, and I always say you need to do a warm up when you're talking to the greens. With myself as a red, you can come straight up to me and say, Michelle, XYZ, and that's fine. I don't expect or don't need any kind of warm up. How are you today? How's this? How's that? Straight to the point with my red. But with greens, it's more important, because remember, relationships are very important. It's about building that relationship, that trust. So begin softly and warmly, socially, if you like. Clearly defined, let them know exactly what you expect of them from this conversation. What are you wanting from this conversation? What's the purpose? Use open questions so they can share their viewpoints. They can feel that their opinions are valued, should I say. Be patient and be persistent. If you feel they're being a bit vague, try and be persistent, but do not be demanding or pushy. Don't put them on the spot. And again, allow extra time for their questions, and that allow them some thinking time. And again, I'll keep reminding you, the precise words that you use are important. Choose your words, words that are going to really resonate and mean something to a caring orientated or green individual. Lastly, the organized orientated person. Give them an agenda in advance. Be accurate. Stick to business. If it's a 10 a.m. meeting, make sure you're there at 10 a.m. It starts on time. Building time for them, thinking time. Building some pauses so that and please, if you're having a one-to-one conversation, don't jump in. If there's a pause, if there's silence, they need that valuable time. To them, it's valuable thinking time. Do what you say that you're going to do. Follow through. If you say you're going to do something, make sure if you're going to send some information after the event, send that information. Make sure it goes out in a timely manner. Don't make promises unless you can be certain that you're going to deliver on them. Don't be frivolous. Don't be ambiguous. Be very clear, detailed information. And don't be too pushy or unrealistic when it becomes to when it comes to deliverables and kind of timelines and things. And again, choose your words. So just want to take just 1 minute to stop for you to think about one person that you struggle to communicate with. And I want you to try and identify their style. And just think about two of the strategies that we've talked about, that two ways in which you could flex your style or adapt your style the next time that you speak to them. And remember that pause and adjustment, because that's the difference between a conversation and a true connection. I'll just give you a moment just to think about that. Okay, if you've got any thoughts you want to share around that, please pop them in chat. Yeah, I like that, Sarah. Bill. Certainly a yellow coming out. Yeah, green introverts. Find myself getting very frustrated. Yeah. So, just moving into the last few minutes. We spent up to now the webinar looking at how to improve our connections to be more effective communicators. But what happens when communication styles are not aligned and conflict arises, not because of a bad idea or ill intent usually, but because two different behavioural preferences are operating from completely opposite priorities. So if we just look at kind of a couple of the um, communication clashes, shall we say, you could have a detail orientated, organized preference person who is communicating with a big picture, creative orientated person. The organized preference needs process, they need the data, they need logic before they can kind of fully understand where you're coming from, what the idea is. The creative, on the other hand, wants to dive into that exciting, look at all these possibilities, generating all these ideas, talking about the future and concepts without getting bogged down in that detail. So the clash there, the creative sees the organiser as a bit nitpicky and slow, dragging their feet. The organised orientated person sees the creative as unreliable or reckless, disorganised. Or we could have a results focused action preference, having a conversation with a people focused caring preference. The action preference needs a quick decision, immediate action. The caring preference needs time to consult, to talk to their colleagues, to get some kind of reassurances from the colleagues, to find out their opinions, to get that kind of consensus. So here we can see straight away the clash is going to be the action preference person sees the caring preference as perhaps indecisive or weak, and the caring preference sees the action preference as pushy and insensitive. So what's the solution? Well, when you hit a clash, your fast thinking system one instinct is to double down on your own style, as we talked about earlier. And the action orientated person will probably get louder. The organised orientated person will ask for even more detail, and this makes the other person retreat further into their own preference. And the only way out of the clash is through pausing to enable slow thinking, system two thinking, and then adaptation of your style. And that is fundamentally an act of respect. And the key is to meet them where they are at. So when clashing with an action, respect their need for speed and control. Stop debating the details and ask, what is the one result you need from me by the end of today? When clashing with a creative, respect their need for excitement and recognition. Stop focusing on the process and say something like, that idea is absolutely brilliant. How can we quickly get others excited about your vision? If we're clashing with the green, the caring, respect their need for harmony and collaboration. Stop commanding and ask, I value your input. How can we make this change feel safe and fair for the whole team, for everybody? And when we're clashing with an organised, respect their need for facts and certainty. Stop pushing for a decision and say, let me send you the backup detail, the data, the evidence, so you have everything you need to feel confident. And by prioritising their communication need over your own, you transform that potential conflict into a productive dialogue built on mutual understanding. So if you take away only 2 ideas from today's session, let them be these. First of all, self-awareness. You know your natural behavioural preferences, your default setting. True communication mastery begins when you understand your fast thinking biases and the paradigm trap that you're most susceptible to. The second idea, adaptation is everything. The key to bridging the gap between any 2 styles is flexing your style. Communication isn't about being right, it's about being heard. By pausing, engaging that slow thinking and adjusting your pace and priority to match the other person's, you transform that potential conflict into a productive connection. And remember, adaptation is actually an act of respect. So thank you very much for joining us today.